Gray, damn it, muttered Melanie, realizing that she had stepped in gum. The pink sticky mess had firmly attached itself to her shoe and refused to come off. Frustrated, Melanie kicked the curb so hard that her thin heel broke with a crack. However, the gum remained stubbornly stuck to her now useless shoe. "Oh, come on," Melanie said it loudly, almost crying in annoyance. Nothing ever went right in her life. Instead of going to college, Melanie wanted to live off someone else's wealth. She took advantage of her natural gifts, her striking looks and youth, and got involved in escorting. However, this field was fraught with not only money, but also a million problems. Sometimes she encountered horrible clients who believed that they could do anything for money, using Melanie like a puppet. That's why, after 2 years, she ran away from it all without looking back. However, Melanie's habits did not change. She still sought wealthy men, but for long-term relationships. However, they rarely ended well. Recently, she started a romance with her boss, but soon his couch potato wife found out about it. Instead of staying with the young and beautiful Melanie, the idiot decided to fire her and beg for forgiveness from the mother of his children. You see, he didn't want to break up the family, but he didn't mind sleeping with Melanie on the office couch and depriving her of a legitimate lunch. Oh, what a scoundrel. Melanie gritted her teeth, remembering her boss. Now the girl was trying to find a job again, or at least a sponsor. She was on her way to an interview at one of the companies, but didn't make it to the office building. How am I supposed to get there now? She grumbled, looking at her broken heel. This scene unfolded at the doors of a luxurious hotel. Politicians, stars, and businessmen stayed there, and influential people came here for lunch. But Melanie didn't have the money to even buy a glass of water in this place. Suddenly, Melanie was drawn to a ringing laugh. A woman dressed in an expensive designer dress got out of a taxi. She looked incredible, and Melanie immediately noticed that the blonde had a legendary Birkin bag, made Melanie's mouth water. Melanie could tell at a glance that it was an original, not a knockoff from the market. However, Melanie was shocked, most of all, not the woman's clothes, but her face. "Denise?" Melanie gasped, not believing her eyes. She even took off her sunglasses, thinking they were obstructing her view and showing her some absurdity instead of reality. The blonde turned around and seeing Melanie frozen next to her, joyfully exclaimed, "Melanie, is that really you?" Denise rushed to the girl, hugging her tightly. Melanie, however, continued to blink in confusion and examine her old friend. Melanie and Denise were from the same orphanage. They even lived in the same room and slept in neighboring beds. Denise was brought to the orphanage from some remote village by her grandmother, who had since passed away. Melanie, on the other hand, ended up in state custody due to her mother's preference for her stepfather over her own daughter. Both girls were 8 years old at the time, but that was the only thing that united them. Melanie didn't like to remember her past, so she tried to avoid old acquaintances. However, she couldn't pass by Denise, at least not because she was in shock. The woman standing in front of her only resembled Denise, with her naive gaze and sincere smile, which Melanie always thought was too broad. Other than that, the blonde had changed. She had lost weight, her cheekbones were no longer round like a hamster's, and her cheekbones stood out. Her blonde hair, the color of linen, was styled in curls, and she no longer wore the huge plastic-rimmed glasses. Melanie wasn't particularly fond of her roommate. Their characters were too different. She considered Denise's naivety and kindness a weakness and called her a gray mouse. "I can't believe even this gray mouse has married. Where did she find such a rich groom? In the library?" Melanie gritted her teeth, noticing the engagement ring on her former roommate's finger. It sparkled in the sunlight with a heart-shaped diamond cut that was larger than 1 carat. Denise, unaware of Melanie's envious thoughts, was happy to meet her. "I haven't seen you in so long. You look so beautiful." "Well, you were always a beauty," said the woman enthusiastically. Melanie mentally snorted, not believing Denise's sincerity. The more she looked at her, the stronger her envy raged. "Did you come for lunch too?" Denise asked hopefully, nodding towards the hotel door. Melanie was only taken aback for a second, then nodded briskly. "Yes, but I had an emergency," she said, pointing to her shoe. "I don't think I'll pass the dress code." "You will," Denise reassured her. "This is my husband's hotel, so consider yourself my guest." You can even come in barefoot." This news left Melanie stunned. However, she always thought quickly when it came to possible benefits. She was a parasite who could definitely determine to whom to cling to get her piece of happiness. Melanie felt that she had to smile at Denise as wide as possible. She hoped that despite her external changes, Denise had remained a naive country bumpkin. In the dim light of the restaurant, the women started talking. Melanie was asking her friend with keen interest how she turned into a lady. "You were going to work as a translator, weren't you?" Melanie asked, recalling their past. "That's true. I am a translator," the girl said. "After graduation, I got a job at an agency that provides translators for business events. That's where I met Robert McLarty. And what did the big shot fall in love with you?" Melanie tried to contain her sarcasm, but it didn't come out well. Fortunately, Denise, who had surrendered to memories of her husband, did not notice it. "Well, you could say that," the woman laughed, taking a sip of green tea. "The thing is, during my studies, I learned not only German, but also French and Chinese. When I arrived at the meeting, I became an unwitting witness to someone else's conversation. Robert's potential partners planned to set him up. It turned out that they bribed a lawyer to forge documents. I hurried to Robert and told him everything. Of course, the deal didn't go through. In gratitude, Robert invited me to dinner. And then, everything just happened." The woman blushed shyly, and Melanie, stuffing a piece of dessert into her mouth, which cost here like a wing from a Boeing, suppressed her snort. Denise told her that her husband was currently aiming for the post of deputy in their city. And Denise worked as an assistant and translator, but she hoped to go on maternity leave soon. "It's just that we haven't been able to have a baby yet," Denise complained, embarrassed. "But I signed up for a clinic to get checked. We won't give up, of course." That is not fair, Melanie thought, poking at the remains of her dessert with a fork and listening to her friend. She had no looks or charm. She smiles like a dummy. She has so much money, she could have plastic surgery. Is Robert blind or something? Then a sudden thought struck Melanie. What if she just took Robert away and she could have a child for him if needed? Melanie, feeling encouraged, reached for her purse and then groaned. "Oh no, I think I forgot my wallet," she said sadly. "Melanie, don't even think about it." Denise waved her hand. "They won't ask for money from us here." "I feel so embarrassed," said Melanie, looking down, then sighed and added, "I was actually going for an interview. There was a conflict at my last job. It's even shameful to tell. I'm afraid you'll misunderstand." Denise hurried to assure her friend that she would definitely understand and not judge her. After a few more sighs, Melanie whispered dramatically, "My boss fell in love with me. He had a wife and 2 children, so I refused him right away. But he started blackmailing me, and then he fired me. And then he began to spread rumors, so I'm afraid a bad reputation might follow me." "How awful," Denise exclaimed. "But you're smart not to give in." Melanie nodded and went on sadly, "But my principles have cost me dearly. I lost my job and I have less and less money. I rent an apartment in the center, but they might ask me to leave." Melanie complained, omitting the fact that her former lover paid for the luxurious apartment. "And today, when I was going for an interview for a secretary position, I broke my heel." "Melanie, maybe it's fate." Denise smiled irritatingly wide again. "My Robert is just looking for a secretary. Diana is going on maternity leave in a month. She could teach you." Melanie didn't refuse her friend's offer for long. The next day, in her best dress, whose length was on the verge of a foul, she appeared in the office of Denise's husband. The girl spent the entire day hanging around the chief's office, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious Robert McLarty. Her wish was granted, and Melanie saw the boss. Her heart began to beat faster. She had already searched for information about the man online, but in person, he was even more handsome than in the photos. The brunette was a model of male sexuality and attractiveness. His gray suit fit him perfectly, making his gray eyes even more captivating. The man had dark, thick hair, a strong chin, a wide lower jaw, and prominent cheekbones. He looked like he had stepped off the cover of a glossy magazine. "Melanie, right?" He smiled, bringing the girl out of her stupor and extending his hand. "How are you settling in?" Melanie shook the boss's hand while charmingly smiling. "Wonderful, thank you. I'm truly grateful to you for the opportunity. "Oh, you can thank Denise for that. She whispered in my ear that I should take care of you." Hearing these words, Melanie promised herself, "I'll take care of you too." The man invited the new employee into his office and explained the scope of her work, promising that Diana would help her in the beginning. So, Melanie began working with Denise and her husband. She often went to lunch with Denise, carefully playing the role of a grateful and sincere friend. A week later, Melanie asked to visit the McLardys, where she began to appear more and more often. Melanie wore seductive outfits, carefully applied makeup, complimented the man, and offered to let him evaluate the new perfume that she had applied to her neck. In general, she used many tricks. However, the man did not see her hints or simply ignored them, making the brunette grind her teeth in anger. A whole month of Melanie's attempts to seduce the boss passed when she decided to take a desperate step. The entire office was buzzing because the elections were around the corner. Robert was on alert because of some tricks by his competitors. When Melanie knocked and entered his office, he was scolding someone on the phone. "I don't want to use the same dirty methods. However, you leave me no choice. And if you dirt on me, which you feed the journalists, is pure fiction. Then I have information about your son, who was treated in a clinic for addiction, ran away from home and avoided arrest for a fatal accident. God knows I don't want to involve a child, even an adult, but you leave me no choice." The man, annoyed, hung up the phone. Melanie mentally smirked. She would easily break the laws of morality and go after other people's heads to achieve her goal. And actually, that's what she planned to do. "Robert, I brought you coffee," she said, putting the cup on the table. "Thank you, Melanie." The man nodded wearily, rubbing his face. The girl shifted from one foot to the other, not leaving the office. The man looked at his secretary and asked, "Anything else, Melanie?" The woman nodded, lowered her gaze to the floor, and began to twist her fingers, as if she were very embarrassed to start a conversation. "I heard your conversation, and I saw the fakes that your competitors spread," she said, not looking at the boss. "I think it would be fair to tell you something important. I'm afraid if the media finds out first, it will be worse. Although I really don't want to betray Denise, so please don't give me away." Robert frowned. "I don't understand you." Melanie sat on the edge of the chair and, leaning forward, blabbered. "Denise and I were in the same orphanage. After that, she got into bad company and tried to get me involved. Denise learned languages not to become a translator. She worked as an escort with foreigners, providing accompaniment and more intimate services. She offered this job to me, but I was scared and refused. We were students, very young, but I know for sure that she was in this field for a long time." Robert looked at the secretary with shock and disbelief as Melanie hurried to reinforce her argument. "Recently, Denise said she couldn't get pregnant. She said confidentially, 'I think this is related to her past.' Of course, I'm certain that this kind of lifestyle is in the past. Denise has changed, but if you once walk the wrong way, you have to be prepared to account for your actions, right? I'm just so invested in you and the team's work that I don't want our efforts to go to waste." "This is nonsense," the man muttered. Melanie shrugged her shoulders. "It's my job to warn you. The main thing is that Denise's skeletons don't come out of the closet at the wrong time." She then pulled out a folder of documents and put a medical certificate in front of her boss. "This is a certificate from the hospital showing the sexually transmitted infections she was being treated for. It's old, of course, and I'm sorry, but I know that Denise had an abortion in her second year." "Where did you get this?" The man looked at the medical document with shaking hands. "As I explained earlier, we were friends in the past. Believe me, I'm only saying this because I know how much you want a child and value your reputation." Melanie's voice trembled and tears filled her eyes. She leaned forward and touched the man's hand. To her relief, he didn't pull away, but sat there like a statue. "That's not all," Melanie breathed. "There's a video of her for adults. I wasn't sure if it still existed, but I managed to find it. It was circulating among our classmates at the time. Maybe it can be removed from the internet. I'm worried someone will see Denise in such a role." "Video? Show me." Robert croaked and Melanie showed the man the clip. The video was of poor quality, but the face of the main character clearly belonged to Denise, while the man's face was not visible. Robert barely held back from throwing the phone against the wall. He was horrified. He remembered his wife's face. Her words were not about being able to get pregnant and not understanding why. The future deputy also imagined what would happen if such information fell into the hands of journalists. This wasn't just a stain on his reputation. No, his good name would be gone. He married an escort, for goodness sake. Part of his election campaign was built around the fact that his wife was a loved woman with difficult fate. Denise was from a village, spent her childhood in an orphanage, and saved his business from a bad deal. She was close to the people, and the story appealed to voters because it reminded them of a modern-day fairy tale about Cinderella. Watching the clip of his moaning young wife, Robert didn't understand what he should do now. The depressed man had no idea that even though the whole story was real, it was not about Denise. Melanie revealed a shameful part of her own biography to him. Even the medical documents were hers, but she forged them for Denise. The video clip was a skilled montage, for which deceitful Melanie paid a lot of money. But she was confident that it would pay off. Melanie didn't even know that modern neural networks could create such realistic videos. Yes, the body wasn't very similar to Denise's, but who knows what she was like in college. "I'll go, Robert," the girl said sadly, and he just nodded. As Melanie left her boss's office, she smiled. However, she wasn't going to stop there. The woman took her phone and called a news portal that always published scandalous news. "Hello," Melanie greeted the interlocutor. "How much will you offer me for a very interesting and exclusive video?" When Denise came home, she was glowing from the inside. However, the mansion was quiet and dark. Thinking that her husband hadn't returned, Denise went to the kitchen and, turning on the light, gasped in horror. "Robert, you scared me. What are you doing in the dark?" The man didn't respond. He looked terrible and was swaying on his bar stool. A nearly empty bottle of whiskey sat in front of him. "Are you drinking?" Denise asked in surprise as she took off her jacket. "On a Monday? Did something happen at work?" "Something happened," he grumbled. "I got married." Denise furrowed her brow, taken aback by her husband's tone. She had never heard him like this before. The woman approached her husband, trying to cheer him up by touching his shoulder, but he brushed her hand away as if she were a bug. "Don't touch me. It's disgusting for me." "What are you saying?" Denise exclaimed, offended. "Okay, that's it. Stop drinking." She tried to take the remaining whiskey, but the man grabbed the bottle from her and threw it on the floor. Denise screamed as the shards scattered across the tiles. "Get away from me." "Got it?" the drunk man yelled. "How could you? You're who?" He stopped, unable to finish his insult. Denise was crying, pressing her hands to her lips. "Robert, what's wrong with you?" she kept asking, not understanding anything. "What's wrong?" the man said in rage. He showed her the video clip. "I've seen it. I watched it about 200 times. Do you have any more of these?" Denise, watching the video, went pale. "Robert, it's not me. Probably your competitors are digging at you again. I've never—" "Get out of my house," Robert shouted. "Do you hear me? I don't believe you. I don't want to see you. You ruined my life. I've kept a snake on my chest." Denise tried to reason with him, but he pushed her roughly, and Denise had to leave the house in tears. She sat behind the wheel of her car and drove off, dialing her friend's number. But Melanie didn't answer. Denise thought in passing that she didn't even have time to share the big news with her husband, and now it didn't mean anything. Denise couldn't stop crying. "Melanie, answer the phone," she begged, needing support. "Hello?" Melanie's voice came over the line suddenly. "Melanie, damn." Denise began to speak, but the phone slipped from her trembling hands. She heard Melanie calling her. She leaned over to grab her smartphone, and the car swerved. A passing truck honked, scaring Denise. She gasped, twisted the wheel, and crashed into a pole, losing consciousness. Robert couldn't open his eyes. He couldn't remember how much he drank the night before, but his head was splitting. He turned on his side and tried to find his wife in bed, but her side of the bed was empty. A sad reality hit him. He got up, looking around, and realized that he had driven Denise away. Oh, he was so wrong. He had flown off the handle from stress and alcohol. He had to figure everything out. Robert grabbed his phone, noticing several missed calls, but not from Denise. Calling the number back, he heard the voice of a doctor. "Your wife was in an accident, and she is in the hospital now. However, she has regained consciousness. The pregnancy is not at risk. Robert didn't understand what shocked him more, that his wife was in the hospital after an accident, or that she was pregnant. He immediately got dressed and ran to the hospital. As soon as he rushed into his wife's room and saw the bandage on her head, Robert fell to his knees. "It's my fault, Denise. When I heard about the accident, my heart almost stopped. If something had happened to you, I would never have forgiven myself. I don't need any deputy posts. I love you. Please forgive me. And the past, I don't care about it anymore." Denise shook her head and smiled her beautiful wide smile, which Robert loved so much. "You won't have to leave your post," she said. "Remember Clark, my old friend whom we helped? He's a journalist now. He called me because they received a video with my participation and were offered to publish it. He paid to redeem the video, but then he immediately called me. He's on his way now." When the journalist arrived, everything fell into place. "I didn't believe in this video right away," said Clark, causing Robert to feel embarrassed for having believed Melanie's words right away. "Now there's a lot of this stuff. It's called deepfake. I decided to find the original, and I'm sure it's not you, Denise." Then I traced the number of the calling woman, and here's what I found. To Robert's lack of surprise, that woman was Melanie. Denise gasped, not wanting to believe in such a low act of betrayal. Being a kind person, Denise wanted to forgive Melanie and send her on her way, but Robert was tired of being good. He sent Melanie in a very specific direction, to the courtroom for defamation. Although the girl got off with a hefty fine and mandatory work, Robert was satisfied. He didn't have time to deal with the inadequate intriguer. He was taking care of his pregnant wife and promised that he would always trust his beloved Denise from now on.